Everybody. So excited to join this wonderful day of learning and building together. And I'm going to jump right in because we have been on all day and we have learned so much. And I hope that this will be a beautiful addition to all that we have learned. And so I am Reverend Cherisse Scott, CEO and founder of SisterReach. We are a reproductive and sexual justice organization here in Tennessee, based in Memphis. And I am presenting our faith advocacy and kingdom building workshop on today. We'll jump right in. So just want to ground us right now and just consider a grounding prayer. And I think it's an appropriate way to lift up the day. So if you would join me, Spirit of justice, mercy, wisdom, and truth, meet us in this place and center us in our shared humanity. Give us the courage to stand firmly for justice, even when truth requires us to examine ourselves. Teach us to act when dignity is threatened, to lead with compassion, and to walk with humility. May we honor the freedom, worth, and sacred agency of every person. May our words, learning, and actions today move us beyond comfort toward collective liberation and guide us to resist oppression, repair harm, and build communities where all people can live with dignity, safety, and abundance. May it be so. And so I wanted to offer some grounding texts as we engage in this time together. And I want us to consider a question of what does our faith, our spirituality, our creator demand of us in this political moment? Right here we have clergy group Isaiah. They were gathered in Minneapolis, voicing concerns about ICE operations and the shooting involving an ICE officer, which resulted in the death of a 37-year-old woman. Isaiah is a nonprofit group which works to fight for racial and economic justice in Minnesota and includes many different religions and faith beliefs. The group has made multiple demands, which include the arrest and prosecution of the ICE officer involved in the shooting. And along with this, the group is also demanding that ICE cease its operations in Minnesota. I think we've all been watching the news. We all have seen what's been going on. And they've encouraged the FBI to hand over case materials to the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension. And I think that our dear sister here lifts up Minister Janae Bates. She says, all of our faith traditions here represent love and compassion and justice and peace. And we come not just in peace, but demanding it, right? So I just want us to, as we consider how we move through this last hour or so, how we end the day, what all we have learned and what all we will take away with us into our various understandings, our work, our scholarship, our ministry, our pastoralship, all the ways in which we are doing this work. So, like I said, SisterReach is based here in Memphis, Tennessee. We also have SisterReach Illinois that is based in Chicago. And we work on behalf of and prioritize Black folks, folks of color, queer, gender expansive people, our young people, men and boys, working from a four-pronged strategy or approach of harm reduction in education, policy, and voter advocacy, culture shift or culture change, and direct service. And these are just some of the programs that we offer, not just here in Memphis, but across the country, and some we offer regionally. And what we're going to learn a bit today, I just want to lift up, but we want to integrate, right, these faith-rooted tools and strategies into ministry models. We've learned so much today. I was able to participate earlier in the self-care workshop, and it was really awesome to help me kind of think about kind of how I situate myself and how I take care of myself. And so those tools, along with in all of the tools that we've learned, are here to help us build these ministry models and build capacity for collaboration with one another. I appreciate you, Reverend Andre, for bringing us together, because this does allow us to meet one another and work with one another, introduce one another. And I hope that this will be a great addition. We want to strengthen the skill sets that I'm sure that so many of us come to this conversation with, right? But we want to strengthen those in cultural humility. And we'll talk a little bit more about that to ensure that we are inclusive and that we are offering equitable ministry. We want to think about how we foster collaborations, not just with one another, but with our congregations, with our community, with our legislators, right? Those who are stakeholders who have the power, right, to advance reproductive justice, advance human rights, advance liberation, advance abundance for our people. And then we want to translate faith-based commitments, and we want to think about that in a tangible way around our democratic process and engagement. So let's talk about the moment that we're in right now. Over the last 4 years, state and federal conservatives, Republican and Democrat, okay, because I'm not leaving anybody out right now, have rolled back human rights protections for various legislation that not only affects all of us as Americans, but disproportionately impacts Black, Latinx or Latino and Hispanic Americans, low income, poor, undocumented, queer and gender expansive folks, people living with HIV, non-Christians and believers on the right side of Jesus-centered justice, from democratic erosion and voter suppression to attacks on bodily autonomy and weaponized theology. We find ourselves at a crossroad moment now. So on this slide, I've highlighted bills that have either already taken effect or are being currently heard on the state and federal levels. Here in Tennessee, we've had a long history of being the state model for conservative lawmaking that is often copycat across southern states. So I've taken the liberty to add some of those bills here as well. And we're all living this nightmare, right? Or at least I consider it a nightmare, experiencing the Trump administration's dismantling of democracy, one human rights issue at a time. And I think that was equally important to lift at a conference or in this symposium today. Those of us who might consider ourselves progressives, maybe moderate, maybe conservative, right? That there are clergy in full support of every piece of legislation on the slide who have the largest voices in the public discourse and represent a party with the most political power. And so for 20 years, a little over 20 years, I've committed my career in reproductive and sexual justice advocacy and as a servant leader in the Christian tradition to dismantling what I call theological fascism. We'll talk more about that by educating and mobilizing faith leadership from various understandings and traditions and advocates interested in working with those of us who are doing our servant leadership work around organizing, because I realize that as much as we kind of do our thing in silos, we really are stronger together. And so whether or not we're talking about the death penalty bill, which is the Human Life Protection Act in Tennessee, or legislation being supported and by faith leaders and the foundation to abolish abortion, if passed, this particular bill would take effect this month and would not allow for retroactive prosecution. I believe that it did not pass, but that has been no short of, for sure, the hard work of our reproductive health rights and justice folks. So let's talk about a little bit what this term means, right? So this was a term that was coined in Chicago in 1994 by 12 Black women while attending a conference to address the impact of the Clinton administration's attempt at healthcare reform. Reproductive and sexual justice was created to center the lived experiences of Black women around issues of our reproductive and sexual health. The framework is grounded in Black feminist theory and human rights. And central to the theory is the universal human right to dignity, self-determination, and autonomy. This work centers people whose liberty has been violated and whose social and economic well-being and culture has been deliberately ignored. And it seeks to liberate and emancipate vulnerable populations from all forms of reproductive and sexual oppression. The framework challenges us to expand our analysis beyond some of those hot topics like abortion rights or LGBT rights and be inclusive of the myriad other issues that preclude women and gender expansive people from achieving reproductive and sexual autonomy. Their initial formation was called Women of African Descent for Reproductive Justice. And so this framework is grounded in human rights and merges social justice issues more broadly in connection with reproductive rights. But what I love most about the framework is that it is the most comprehensive and intersectional framework that I believe exists in this kind of human right understanding across sectors or across justice disciplines. The frame considers the whole person and their needs, even needs that have nothing to do with their reproductive and sexual health. It also offers easy adaptation for other people of color's cultural and social struggles. Finally, there is a natural, logical relationship between religious and cultural ideologies at the intersection of human rights within it. And 32 years later, this framework is still filling the gaps that many other frameworks cannot, as it places the most vulnerable person at the center of the lens as the expert of their own life, their own needs, and how they inform abundance for themselves, but also for their families and their communities. I want to highlight that I have here that it says reproductive and sexual justice, because initially the understanding was only reproductive justice, but over these 32 years, we've been very intentional to include all types of people. So definitely this shift is evolving in the movement due to the unapologetic and intentional inclusion of men and boys, for queer and gender expansive folks and folks who give birth, and those who identify with this intersectional framing of human rights. So let's look at these. So every woman or individual who can give birth has the human right to decide if and when they're going to have a baby, right? If they don't want to have one, and making sure that they have options to prevent or end a pregnancy as they see fit, to make sure that they can parent the kids that they already have, and making sure that they have those necessary social supports to be able to do that, right? It's one thing, to have a stance or whatever, whether it be pro-life or pro-choice, but we got to think about the lifespan of that baby, even when that baby gets here, right? What I find is that these folks many times who are anti-abortion are just that. They are pro-birth, but we don't necessarily see them being pro-life throughout the span of, making sure that child can eat, making sure that family has access to healthy foods, make sure that that household has the jobs that it needs to sustain itself, that it is not living in a danger zone. I mean, right now Memphis is militarized, and we've been militarized, a little over the last 2, 3, 4 months. And we've seen what has looked like, what that has looked like for some of our people, especially those in low income neighborhoods, especially those who are undocumented. And so we also want to lift up that this human right is supposed to keep us from fear from the violence from an individual or the government. I don't know that we think about legislation as violence, right? But we should be thinking about legislation that impedes our ability for human flourishing, for a quality of life that is sustainable, as violent, right? And so also the human right to bodily autonomy, free from all forms of reproductive oppression. And then SisterReach has added this one in the bottom middle because of the work that we do in my own personal ministry, which is the right to understand and express a religious, non-religious, or spiritual identity without violence, shame, exclusion, or manipulation. And then a quality of life, my favorite, that is sustainable before and beyond the ability to give birth or to parent. And so, whether we're talking about, reproductive health or rights, I think that it's important that we really think about how we adopt this framework of reproductive and sexual justice, because it is inclusive of all the people, right? And it doesn't leave anybody out of the conversation in the family. It doesn't, it considers all levels of systemic issues that we might be navigating at any given time. And so why should this framework be adopted by interfaith communities? I think the first thing I want to lift up is that this framework is rooted in universal moral values, right? It's not partisan, it's principled. The principles affirm and align with foundational teachings across traditions, including human dignity that we see in Christianity, in Islam, or Judaism. Compassion and non-harm, like we see lifted up in Buddhism and Hinduism. Justice and moral accountability that we see in Abrahamic traditions, and sacred agency and stewardship of the body. It also doesn't replace theology, right? So that's not ever been our objective as advocates, but it provides a justice framework through which theology can operate responsibly in public life, right? So want to lift that up. And then it moves faith from charity right, to structural justice. So many faith communities engage in very tangible examples of community engagement for individuals, including food pantries and crisis counseling, room at the inn support. We've even supported churches like Freedom's Chapel and Christ Missionary Baptist Church, where I attend, with their room in the inn support, and then also fostering support. And where those outreach programs are righteous, we need them, right? They're necessary. The reproductive and sexual justice framework asks a deeper question. Are the systems that create these types of crises being addressed through my ministry efforts, right? Moving faith communities from individual morality and charity to structural justice and systems change, right? From an emergency response to prevention through program development, implementation, or actions like influencing policy. From stigma to providing intentional, inclusive, and compassionate space for dignity and visibility. From theological control to spiritual agency and self-determination. And it shifts the conversation from what should this person do to what conditions make human flourishing possible for this individual. I also believe that reproductive and sexual justice is kingdom work, right? It's explicitly anti-coercion. And for interfaith communities, this is critical. It affirms the right to any religious belief or the right to non-belief, the right to spiritual identity without any type of manipulation, coercion, shame, or anything like that, control, anything of that nature. And it protects Christian communities from state, federal, and racial interference, Muslim communities from discrimination, Jewish communities from theological erasure, secular communities from moral coercion. And it ensures that faith and religion can be expressed without being weaponized, which is what we need. It also centers bodily autonomy as sacred. So across traditions, the body is sacred. Our bodies are our temple. Humans are created in the divine's image. Non-harm is a moral imperative. It also insists that bodily autonomy is not rebellion, right? The ways in which I think the rhetoric has set it up that, just so I say my body, my choice, I'm not rebelling, right? But I'm given the sacred agency that belongs to me. Right. So interfaith communities need a framework that protects the marginalized from issues like state and federal legislative violence, gender-based violence, religious violence, medical racism, domestic terrorism, policy-based harm as well. And it provides that level of a guardrail. And then interfaith coalitions struggle, right? When we think about a shared language across traditions, something that is just like so exciting to me, work that SisterReach is evolving into more formally, understanding that these coalitions many times struggle when theologies differ, because some of us here on the call might be a part of some of these state-based or regional-based and even potentially local-based coalitions where maybe some of the issues that we think are important are being addressed, but other issues may not be being addressed because folks don't really know how they want to show up around some of these issues, right? We don't want to get in nobody's way. We don't want to make anybody angry. We don't want to put ourselves on Front Street. But I think that reproductive and sexual justice offers a rights-based floor or foundation from which we can come to a level set about human flourishing, right? A dignity-based common denominator, a justice-centered shared framework, right? Allowing all of us, regardless of what we believe, to advocate and to disagree even theologically, while we still organize structurally. Because I think, we're not going to get this, done with just one particular faith understanding alone. It's going to take all of us, right, to fix what is happening right now, to bind together what has fully been and continues to be unraveled around democracy, around our community safety, around the weaponizing of Jesus, right? It's going to take all of us. And then it aligns with democracy as kind of a final point here. Democracy depending on informed choice, family stability, freedom of belief, safety from state violence, strengthening democracy because it protects the conditions necessary for participation in civic life. I believe that when people can't access health care, when folks cannot parent safely, when they can't express their faith freely, or live without some level of reproductive or sexual oppression, democracy is eroded. Okay. So our framework protects the democratic participation. Okay. Let's keep going. So let's talk about the use of this particular term, because I've lifted it up a couple of times. So the use of reproductive and sexuality as a means of control, and where I want to give the definition: the control and exploitation of women, girls, and pregnant capable individuals through our body, sexuality, labor, fertility, and reproduction in violation of our human rights. So thinking about this as a means of control of populations is endemic and it's long-standing. Okay. Black women, men, youth, people of color have suffered under the control and exploitation of white nationalists and of those adjacent with whiteness who believe that women should only give birth when it benefits someone else and should be compelled to do so whether or not it benefits that woman. This definition names what reproductive and sexual justice advocates have called or named reproductive and sexual oppression, which is the common issue that movement advocates are working to dismantle. Now, I am a bit of a visual learner, so I added some visual examples, right? And I'll just go right to this one here in the top left corner, because that's me, okay? I was interviewed some years ago, probably about 2015 or so, about Black women's position on abortion, and at the intersection of we were at very heightened Black Lives Matter movement, police sanctioned violence, state sanctioned violence against our people, against our children, against our men, against our daughters, right? And in an interview with New York Magazine, I made this comment. And anti-abortion advocates took that comment and my picture and created this graphic and pushed it across the internet, not just only to shame me, but to silence me, right? I won't act as if doing this type of work has not cost my own personal safety, right? The safety of my family, the safety of those that are employed by SisterReach, my staff, and that I still stand boldly because I realize that I'm doing righteous work. Somebody has to stand. Somebody has to be on their front line. Somebody has to advocate for those who are without a voice or who are misunderstood because of the choices that we have made. And so I said that for many Black women, abortions were as much of an act of love as bringing a child into this world and raising it could ever be. And it makes me think about the movie Beloved. And I remember the scene where Setha sees her master, that her slave master that she has already run away from. She grabs her children up and runs into the shed and she cuts their throats, right? And she is then categorized as a monster, right? But in her world, her slave master is the monster. And in her world, she was saving and preserving her children from rape, from forced labor and harm and shame, all of the things. And so in her mind, it made sense for her. I think that for me, it was the same idea here, right? When I made that type of a comment. And I made that comment not just as somebody who advocates on behalf of people who want to have the reproductive health care choice of their choosing, but as someone who's had to make that type of a difficult choice my own self, right? So using my own lived experience, my own harm, my own issues around navigating poverty and no parental support as a single mother, all of the things, the trauma that came from that, not just for me, but also for my child, right? So whether we're talking about what I said or we're talking about law enforcement in our school system, we have our varying ideas about that. Whether or not we talk how we feel about pregnant folks using drugs or even smoking cigarettes, right? How we feel about mass incarceration of Black men, but mass incarceration, let's talk about it, the mass incarceration of Black kids right now, right? And even what we've seen happening, that the Trump administration said was their reasoning for militarization, to just be about getting out the quote unquote illegals, right? But also leveraging that to attack Black communities and here in Memphis in particular, right? It's something that we cannot just kind of overlook. And maybe we think about that as militarization, but in the reproductive and sexual justice community, we connect that to reproductive and sexual justice because that still impedes on my quality of life. It still impedes on my safety. It still impedes on my ability to be self-determining and navigate the life that I would want to have. Let's look at this one. Let me see if I can make it work. This is Bishop Iona Locke, who was preaching some years ago. I think she's just one of my heroes in the faith, and definitely just want you to just hear a little bit of what she had to say.
Every so often, about every 10 generations, that women rise up and say, no more. We're getting ready to crest to the 21st century. And you're allowing men up on Capitol Hill to negotiate over your womb. And you're not even having a vote or a say about it. There's a phone number. You need to call your senator now. As long as you vote, you tell your senator, I'm not having it. You will not stand on the Senate floor and discuss my womb. You have no illegal authority over what happens in my womb.
And this was in the 90s. This video is from the 90s, right? And she was preaching against policies being informed by those legislators at that time who were attempting to inform what healthcare should look like for women and individuals seeking care. So reproductive and religious oppression are not new. Matter of fact, these goals, the goals of those who desire to manipulate the experience of women and individuals has been like this since the beginning. If we think about our full existence, right, and on this American soil, first brought here as brought here as Africans to be enslaved. Let's keep going.
Every so often.
Excuse me. So I want to talk about religious oppression. And so thinking about that definition of reproductive and sexual oppression, we've adapted at SisterReach this definition of religious oppression based on the ways in which Christian nationalism and even more sinister form of white narcissism causes harm in the lives of both religious and non-religious people at the intersection of their identities, causing religious trauma and chaos. And here are two Pentecostal preachers who challenge the status quo of socialized moral norms, errant theology, and doctrine, and are still treated as outcasts in the conservative Christian church due to their liberatory theologies, racial analysis, gender-affirming inclusivity, and unapologetic love and acceptance for and by their God. One of them happens to be my beloved bishop of the Fellowship of Affirming Ministries, Bishop Yvette Flunder, and then the late Bishop Carlton Pearson. Both of their ministries practice revolutionary love. They continue to inform and empower us by examples of a revolutionary Jesus whose ministry, purpose, and presence centered the poor, and centered the poor, was centered in compassion, and one that was intentionally and unapologetically inclusive. Jesus was a sacred leader who could have been cocky, but instead was teachable. His ministry was revolutionary as he was willing to challenge unjust laws, and was a visionary, and his entire purpose on the earth was centered in liberation. So those who employ religious oppression stand as a barrier between an individual, their choice of a deity, spiritual or ritualistic practice, and impedes their ability to self-determine and impede their ability to their bodily, spiritual autonomy and religious value, or whether or not they have that or not. And I have coined this term, theological fascism, considering the spirit, action, and values of Christian nationalists, taking that a step further beyond religious oppression. It isn't just that they are advancing white narcissistic values as the national standard and calling it white supremacy, but they have historically and unapologetically hijacked and advanced toxic versions of the Bible to advance control and power nationally and globally. And so it's imperative that we who are theologically conscious and educated push back on theological fascism, not just from our pulpits on Sunday morning, but in our daily lives, with our vote, in how we engage religious texts in the academy, in conversation with our legislators, and as part of what we share to our congregants. In our SisterReach approach for best practices, right, for this type of engagement. So I wanted to make sure first that we kind of level set on what reproductive and sexual justice was. And then I wanted to move us to how we apply that and consider how we implement it. So our work, first off, is navigated through a womanist and Black liberation theological perspective. 4 foundational ideas upon which we base this work is that the body is sacramental, and the premise of all that we experience in it, which is divine. That a woman, man, or gender queer or gender expansive person can fully participate in the image of God without the need for a mediator. That the voices of women and gender expansive people, often excluded from traditional interpretations of biblical texts, philosophical conversations, and solution talk, are available, effective, empowering, and prophetic. And while we hold the biblical text to be sacred, we reserve the right to interrogate the text therein and read it in ways that affirm the multiplicity of Black women's and other people's experiences, especially in ways that privileges God's interaction with them and what is relative to them. This includes the consideration of other religious texts and philosophies, as our sacred experiences are not monolithic as Black people or of the African diaspora. And with these foundational concepts as our starting point, we build our understanding of the relevance that reproductive and sexual justice is as a framework through which we might approach more difficult conversations about reproductive and sexual health, gender binaries, and compassionate inclusion. Because our faith-based work is primarily educating, organizing, and mobilizing Black Christian churches, employing a womanist and Black liberation lens, Jesus-centered theological perspective, and has been instrumental in our personal spiritual healing and key to decolonizing Jesus's ministry. So ways that we have been able to organize and mobilize folks both in the clergy space and the advocacy space is introducing clergy, laity, religious scholars, and other religious communities to the framework as a political home and a point of entry into social justice. So just as whatever your denomination or your religious affiliation is, and you are serious about that, and you're committed to that, in the social justice space, in the advocacy and human rights space, it is also imperative that you find a political home to where you rest your understanding in doing justice-centered work, right? This work serves as a bridge between reproductive and sexual justice and other human rights advocates to religious leaders and communities interested in social justice-minded ministry. We try to curate a space for healing, joy, and cross-focused sacred collaboration. And we reclaim a hijacked Jesus for believers who are committed to justice and humanity as demonstrated in Jesus's ministry. And finally, kingdom building, which is rooted in compassion through developing religious leadership. And now let's get you in the conversation. I want to hear you all's voices, right? How do you see yourself in the work? What's your story? What brings you here, right? I know for the sake of time, we may not be able to hear from everyone, but I'd love to hear from maybe one or two of you about what brings you into the work that you are doing, because it's not just your ministry work, but what led you to that work, right? What led you here? So I'd love to hear from someone. Let's see who's going to be brave. Mm-hmm. Come on, don't be shy. Don't be shy. Because I will volunteer. I can volunteer, So I'm gonna give you your chance. Go on once.
I'll be brave.
Come on, Reverend Yvette. There we go. There we go.
Yes. So my work is at the intersection of faith and food insecurity.
Yes,
I do it from an advocacy standpoint. And I shared that in the 1960s, my mother was a Black Panther. And so part of the work that she did was going to food establishments in the South to integrate them. So thinking about a time when, as a people, we were not even allowed to go into a restaurant and sit down and have a meal, let alone even trying to go through a back door, like some places just wouldn't allow us. So looking at that injustice, I feel like it's a part of my DNA. And then secondly, I'll say that I live in an area in the Dallas area that is considered a food desert. And so what that said to me is, as a faith leader, how is God calling me to be an ecclesial disruptor of these systemic injustices and the root causes? So that's what leads me here, because so many people that I care about in this community are impacted by it. And I know that's true in communities, not just in the Dallas area, but in other states as well.
Very good. Thank you so much for sharing that. I'd love to hear from one more person. One more person. Perhaps one of our brothers on the line. I see one I want to call on, but I'm going to see if he's going to unmute for me. Come on, Reverend Dr. Milo. Come on.
Sure, Dr. Scott. Reverend Scott, thank you. But yes, when I'm having to think about the why, my why is birthed off the experience, my personal experience of growing up with injustice, and also seeing others in my community affected by injustice. So that's why I do the work with Micah here in Memphis. So I'm pretty sure we cross paths.
Oh, yes.
Of the work and the passion that is birthed in me came out of those real lived experiences. I'm from a rural area. I'm not from Memphis. I'm from Dyersburg, Tennessee, which is very rural, very agrarian, very white, very red. Some nice words that I can use. But I'm going to end it with this. I love your presentation because, and I love the work that I do, is grounded in who I am. Toni Morrison wrote a book about self-regard. And that was an eye-opener for me as I took my courses at Howard, understanding how our agency has been stripped, and in your particular context of what you're speaking on today, the woman, and we're experiencing it right now, real time. I preach it in the congregation all the time. You think you're coming for Black people, you think you're coming for brown bodies, but they're actually coming for all of us.
They're coming for all of us.
Right? So my work is birthed off many people like yourself, and also many mentors throughout my life. I'm a justice impacted person myself, so it's personal with me, and I'm going to do whatever I can to help my brothers and sisters navigate the systems.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Dr. Lumpkin. I appreciate that. And so I love what both of you share, right? It is your own kind of, as we evaluate what brings us to this world, because see, I think that when things get a little tough, and things are really tough, things are tough for SisterReach right now. This conservative administration is trying to shut us down. I mean, it's just no other way to say it, because of what it is that we fight for, right? Because we are pushing back on criminalizing people who are living with HIV, because we refuse to allow women who use drugs to lose custody of their children, while the state does not provide access to behavioral health clinics, support, or rehabilitation for a pregnant person. Right, we're pushing back on, like Reverend Andre was doing the work on the Purpose Pain case, right? Pushing back on the death penalty, especially with the understanding that we don't have all the evidence, or that there is more evidence that needs to be considered, right? All of those types of situations. And so I think that when the going gets tough, and it's tough right now, I promise you, I hope that you will always come back to self. Always come back to your why, of why you are doing this work, why this work is important to you, what it is, your own personal healing, right? But also thinking about it in the context of a broader lens of, if it's impacting you, it's impacting your brother, it's impacting your sister, right? I'm talking a lot about reproductive and sexual health specific to women, but let's think about the ways in which, Tennessee didn't expand Medicaid. So your prostate exam, if you don't have health care, means you can't get it. Right. So that is still impacting your sexual health. It's still impacting your ability to thrive or not to thrive. Medicaid is on the chopping block right now. Medicare is on the chopping block right now. I take care of my daddy. My daddy is in my care, right? A veteran of this country who, without my help, would not be properly cared for, right? So I'm doing everything that I can on top of doing the things that I do for the community, of also trying to supplement what the U.S. government refuses to do for our veterans, male, female, and all in between, right? And so that's something to consider. So when I think about, this past July 4th, my birthday was the day before July 3rd, 250 years of what were we really celebrating? 250 years of Christian nationalism is what was really going down. 250 years of what our sister was talking about, food insecurity. I'm gonna push you a little bit on that term, and I want you to consider the term food apartheid, because there's plenty of food, right? But we are also seeing situations in the state where SNAP benefits are being cut because people don't want folks to eat shrimp and steak. Right. So I guess we're going to make food elitist, I suppose, to where I can't eat what what I want to eat just because I'm on food stamps. Right. Or I can only have access to the types of juices or milks that you think my baby ought to have. Right. I can't afford the organic food. I can't really necessarily afford to take my SNAP benefits to Whole Foods, because that means I got even less access to groceries for that month allotment of money. Those types of things. So consider your why you are in this work, right? And everything that you do. That for me is the very beginning of how you do justice-centered work at the intersection or on the overlap, right? Because I don't think that, this is not apart from my ministry. This is my ministry, right? Me leading SisterReach, me advocating for women and girls and children, our communities. All of that is part of our ministry work. But while we think about that, I want us to be even self-reflective right now, right? Because I think that, we're lifting up things like food insecurity or food apartheid and thinking about, violence and the ways in which we're showing up and some of what's been shared. But let's think about some of these other things, because it's not just about how we are impacted. It's about how the people that we're ministering to are impacted and how we are showing up to support them. Right. So in the midst of considering how you might do this type of work, right, how you might truly engage your work, right, and coalitions that you are a part of, your own congregations, churches that you are either the pastor of or in ministry leadership, or you are you are just part of the membership itself, laity. How do you think about some of these things? And how do you think about some of the folks that sit next to you in the pew or next to you in the seminary, depending on what they understand and believe? How do you feel about sex? How do you feel about people who have been in poverty for a long period of time? Does judgment rise up for you? Does individual shame and what do you think about people using drugs? I think it's one thing for us to talk about it kind of way up here in the stratosphere. It's another thing to deal with our uncle, our brother, our daddy, our sister, our cousin, our mama who's strung out on cocaine. Right? How you think about young folks having sex? Right? Do you support comprehensive reproductive and sexual health education? And if you're in Tennessee or Texas or Georgia or Louisiana, well, maybe not Louisiana, because they actually did pass sex education laws, but nobody implemented it. So how do we feel about teen pregnancy at the intersection of supporting young people not having access to education? What do we think about women preaching, teaching? How do we feel about what an affirming church looks like? And I'm not talking about the fact that you got gay folk at your church, okay? I'm talking about the fact that when Valentine's Day comes around, is the only representations of love a man and a woman? And how does that potentially isolate or marginalize them? You may not have the theology to make you feel comfortable about LGBT inclusion, but what does your action look like? How are you actualizing love? Right? So in order to do this work, we've really got to be able to also deal with the things that sometimes makes us really uncomfortable. And some of these things really can make us uncomfortable. What are we not preaching? What are we not teaching in Bible study? What are we not engaging, right, in the academy? And why is that? Why is that? What are we afraid to lose? Who are we afraid to lose? Are we afraid to lose God, or are we afraid to lose our relationship with the Lord, or the relationship with the divine of our understanding? Or is it more informed by those around us and not being accepted by them? Black folks split on LGBT stuff. Black folks are split on trans kids. And depending on where we sit in that conversation, we are fully divided many times with how, with what happens at the polls based on that. But we've also got to think about this, where if I vote for this thing, what is the long-term impact of what that looks like? Because it was all well and good when we were talking about not wanting folks to be able to work with their own young people, a parent to support their young person of trans experience. It was all well and good when we wanted to stop those parents from being able, right, to offer gender affirming care to their kids, until somebody heterosexual with their heterosexual kids needed to make some health choices. And those same laws stopped them from being able to do that, because we were rah-rahing over here on the thing that we wanted to kind of die on the sword about. So we got to be thinking about this when we're thinking about doing justice-centered work at all times. So let's think about it. What tension surfaced by even looking at that? Any things that kind of came up for folks? Anything that made you feel a little uncomfortable reading it on that screen? Because I deal with all types of folk. I work with all types of faith understandings. I work with atheists, agnostics. I work with all the folk. Baptist church. I've been a part of Church of God in Christ once upon a time. I go to a Baptist church. I was ordained in a non-denominational church first, and then again in an affirming ministry institution. Right? What do we think about that? So what tensions are coming up for you? It is in those tensions that I want you to really think about how you might advance your justice-centered ministries, how you might advance, how you're going to move. Hey, I'm not going to ever talk about this, that, and the third. I mean, okay. But who in your congregation, or who under your tutelage, or who in your family? Because it's bigger than just who we deal with in ministry space. It's in our personal space. Who's being marginalized because you don't want to deal with it? Why does it have to be about you and not them? So justice-centered advocacy, doing kingdom building work at the intersection of human rights, many times means for us to decenter ourselves and to center the person or the persons who are experiencing the harm. Okay? Keep going. So let's talk about this kind of evaluation. What is your church or ministry doing? Are you creating brave or safe space for folks? And not just anybody, but the whosoever. Because see, we like to say whosoever will, let them come, until they come biologically male in a dress. Then we want to put them out. Whosoever will, let them come, until they walk into our congregation smelling like weed. Whosoever will, let them come, right? Until they got that dress up too high, because they just came from the street. They just came from the street selling their body to live. And they're going to come with that money and put it in the tithing box. What are we actually doing in our ministries to ensure that we are thinking about the least of these? So if we're interested in doing that type of work, kingdom building work, We got to keep thinking about and making space for that. So considering those questions, we might be led to a deeper description of abundant life for our communities, providing us with goals and strategies to move forward towards justice, right? So do our faith traditions limit the well-being of people in our churches, in our lives, in our families, in our whatever? What am I already doing to increase the power and well-being of the people in my congregation or my community, my fellow peer in the academy? How am I showing up for my pastor, my bishop? How am I showing up for my priest? How am I showing up for the little old lady across the street? How am I showing up for my neighbors next door to me whose lives may not necessarily be something I agree with? But how am I showing up for their humanity? Right. So again, I say, and I do a lot of work, like I said, with folks because, I want to say that this is not sexy work. And for those of you who know that this type of work can actually get you funding from the state or from the country, right? Federal, state, local resources, I want you to understand that, this isn't like, it's not sexy work. It's really not. It's really dangerous work, actually. It's really work that it robs my sleep. I wake up every day, almost 3-4 o'clock in the morning, every day AM. The more stuff that that's going on in the public conversation, the more sleep there's robbed, to be quite honest, right? So it's not necessarily something I'm trying to make you not want to do. I just want to be honest about what this is. I just want to be honest about what it is. And so by seeking, identifying, and addressing all of the issues that may function as barriers to the flourishing of the people we serve, of our own selves, including our own faith traditions and practices, this reproductive and sexual justice framework invites us to consider the natural needs of those who are living on the margins, whether they be women, men, boys, girls, elders. We do sexual health education in a nursing home. And we do that because we know that some of our seniors are actually paying sex workers and not using condoms because they can't get pregnant or get somebody pregnant, but they are contracting HIV as a result of it. So we go to the nursing homes with condoms. We go to the nursing homes with lube. We go to the nursing homes with sex toys. All of that is ministry. Sexual pleasure is ministry. Right? So we got to be able to be thinking about those things as well. And for some, the vision of abundance changes as a result of considering questions like these. And since we've even been talking during our time today, has your vision changed? Right? And if so, how has it changed? What tensions have surfaced even now? How has your idea of the ways that perhaps you want to engage and do this work? What tensions have come up for you? Those are the things, right? Now, if I had, 6 hours or 12 hours with y'all, we would do this. We would break out into working groups and we'd really kind of, test this even further, because I want to make sure that we walk away from something like this, at least in this small window of time, with something to ponder. All right. Okay. So let me give you some questions for yourself, right? Something that I want you to take back beyond today. Take back and think about it next time you are, sitting with your pastor, or if you are the pastor, sitting with your ministry leaders, sitting with your wives, sitting with your husbands and partners, sitting with those in your congregation who are excited about doing things in community, right? And thinking about how you give them the go ahead to be able to do those things. How can you all engage the broader community in the things that are important? Right? You engage folks. Our brother said he was a part of Micah, which is a coalition of folks here in Memphis. And I think that there's variations of that same formation in different cities, right? Our brother at Mississippi Boulevard runs the Black Clergy Collaborative. And even with what Reverend Johnson is doing today, right, is inviting us, right? Oh, I see somebody left me a message. Let me see. My visions of what could be possible in Memphis has changed today because of your ministry and work. Thank you. I'm grateful. I had no idea. Come on, dear Sister Jessica. All right. Come on. All right. Right. And if it's only you, that's just one more person who I can say that our work, our analysis, right? Hopefully my passion and compassion can influence, not to convert you to do anything that you are uncomfortable with, but to just invite you. Just invite you. I don't know why I'm coughing, y'all. Excuse me. Excuse me. Take that question with you. Let's see. Let's keep going. And so engage in the community, right? Think about some of these. These are just some things that you could do. Some ways that you could engage with organizations like SisterReach or coalitions like Micah or the Black Clergy Collaborative, you know, or whatever is in your city and state. There are sexual and reproductive justice organizations. The majority of our organizations are in the South. And the sister that's in Dallas, one of our colleagues there, Marsha Jones, she used to run the AFIA Center. She recently closed it. And she's opened a new organization that focuses on health and wellness. The acronym is HUE, and I'm gonna mess it up because it's very new. It's not all the way in my spirit yet. But think about reaching out to her. If because I think the other part of this that I want to walk away with is, and in no way to mute your own personal leadership, but I will say that it's even more impactful, especially if you can connect with organizations and folks that are on the ground doing the work. SisterReach has been running a pantry since 2020. Right. And what's been one of the most amazing things is when local churches have supported us and invested in us. We have like Neshoba Unitarian Universalist just sends us a Sunday worth of offerings once a year. It's so helpful because we can then turn right back around and take that money into getting groceries and getting underwear and things like that, right? Just ways you can partner, because sometimes, thinking about capacity, I want to lift that up. We don't always have the capacity. Like, Lord, I can't take on one more ministry. Okay, right? And we understand that, right? But definitely we want to think about these different ways that we can show up. Media engagement. We do media training with clergy. We help develop prayers and liturgy that really reflect the values of human rights, right? Community education. That's another one. Like, this is community-based education for SisterReach, right? Talking to your legislator, your elected officials. We got a lot going on in these midterms, baby. Everything is at stake right now. Right. So this is the time. And because of Christian nationalism, those of us who understand the realities of what is at stake and are unwilling to allow this weaponization of the biblical text in particular, have a responsibility to add our voices to the greater narrative that makes it seem as if the Christian nationalist has the moral high ground and authority. Nobody's pushing back. We're not loud enough. So let me help you. Y'all not loud enough. It's time to get louder. It's time to get louder. We have this doesn't change unless we change it. There is no Superman that's going to swoop in on us. And faith without works is dead. You see what I'm saying? And so we have an obligation to figure out and educate ourselves, to elevate our mind, to expand our understanding, to get engaged in what is happening, whether or not it's our church leading it or we're connecting with an organization that's doing it, one that we know is a trusted community member, right? We have an obligation, right? So think about one of these. I'd love to hear which one of these may have jumped out to one of you. So, Sister Jessica, since you lifted it up, which one of these might be, coming up to the top for you as something that you could feel like you could lead, that you could do, or you could partner?
Well, this is kind of my life anyway. Like my fun Zoom fact is that while it was developed for telehealth, it was almost immediately co-opted by the online sex industry.
Mm.
I know because I was on a Zoom call in an international group I was working for, because we had to do everything. It was pre-pan, right? But we had to work on Zoom primarily as a staff because we were literally all over the globe. And my friend said, "What are you doing with Zoom on your laptop?" And I said, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Do you not know how we use that? And the breakout rooms are discreet and private. So, Anyway, so that's my I love what I'm hearing. I'm so inspired. I wish I could get my husband to move home. But I want to support all. I don't. I was just writing that the heroes of my childhood were Dr. King and Jimmy Carter because they were my parents' icons of living out your faith, of being Christians in the world. The public service was always ministry. I'm an American Baptist pastor now, and I do climate justice work from an interfaith standpoint.
Very good.
Right. And so I've been doing that for 20 years. And it's the integration, right? Like here in Memphis, we are just north of the crossroads. We live almost like we oversee something. Like we must come together as Eastern Arkansas, Northern Mississippi, and Southwest Tennessee in order to be who we already are in function, right? This is the Baptist version of my Anglican upbringing. In the Anglican tradition, theology is driven by practice, right? Liturgy often forms the theology. And so now that I'm a Baptist and I'm living in these four freedoms of a completely different way of being Christian, pick what term you want. Critical race theory, intersectionality, crossroads. There's something that my friends in the Northeast call me and I can't remember. Anyway, thank you for calling on me, and I am grateful.
Thank you. I appreciate that. All right. Wonderful. Wonderful. This is great. We're going to jump on in because it's almost, I got about 4 more slides and I want to make sure we have some time to continue discussing. And I just want to I want to lift up ways that, other folks are fighting back across the country, right? On Christian nationalism and theological fascism. And the photos here are ways that clergy have increased their presence because sometimes that's all it takes, that you just need to be visible. Right now, I always caution my colleagues in the repro space not to be calling on us just for optics to stand behind them as they lift up issues and not engage us beyond the conference, the press conference. So I'm always critical and I'm always on them about that because that's transactional, that's tokenizing, but really engaging folk, right? And so, but these are just some ways that some of the clergy that some of us know and love, might be some familiar faces on the screen here, folks that we know are showing up across this country and are doing their due diligence, that are leveraging their networks, that are, and even I would even go as far as to say their celebrity, that are leveraging those opportunities to advance liberation for everybody, right? To lift up injustice, to call out or call in Christian nationalism, right? To really, put that thing on its head. Okay, we got some more. I see some more in the chat. Hold on, let me see. Wait a minute. I love folks engage. Okay, yeah. Okay, you know her. Wonderful. That's so great. I'm so glad. The heroes of my childhood were Jimmy Carter. Okay. Oh, I see final post in the series. Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. So these are just some opportunities here that you could also be considering, right? So whatever that looks like, it doesn't have to just be around reproductive and sexual health. I think one of the final things I want to say about the framework is that it's part of the human rights framework. And the way that I teach reproductive and sexual justice is that if any element of human rights is not being realized by that individual, then they are not actually experiencing reproductive and sexual justice. They are not experiencing human rights. And even more importantly, they are not experiencing the abundance that is their sacred birthright. Right. So want to think about that as well. Okay. Let's see. And let's think about these, this kind of commitment, because I want you all to, just like a couple have talked about this, and hopefully continuing to be transformed and continuing to just to walk away from this time together with hopefully a charge, right? Because my charge to you, my call to action is to get involved. It's to get involved. It's to continue to be educated. And of course, I can't cover it all in an hour and 15 minutes, but I am so eager and excited to be able to come and support you and your ministry or your coalition, to share about this framework, to share about different ways that SisterReach has been able to do this work. And I think I will probably be among I might be the pioneer interfaith and reproductive justice advocate in our movement, being hired to do this because I was clergy 22 years ago, to organize folk in the Nation of Islam and and Orthodox Muslims, right? To bring together, because my work started in Chicago, so to bring together those folks in the mosques, to bring together those folks in the synagogue, to bring together these important folks to ensure that everybody has, at the very least, we got the same objective. We want everybody to live all right. We want everybody to be all right. And that we are only as strong as the ones of us who are weaker. And that we have an obligation to support one another and pull one another along and ensure that it doesn't matter, if something were to happen and, the person sitting next to me got shot, or the person sitting next to me, needed the Heimlich maneuver, I'm not asking them who they believe in before I help them. I'm just going to help them, right? So thinking about that, some takeaways, right, is to consider this framework as a political home, right? Thinking about the ways in which your church or your ministry, your own personal ministry, your scholarship needs to be centered and democracy focused, democracy driven, right? And then understanding that in order for us to build kingdom, and I'm using very, very churchy, very Christian language right now, right? But kingdom building for me is just this universal wellness. How about that? Universal well-being for our brother, for our sister, for every person, right? In order to do that, it requires us to collaborate. And here are some ways that you can be engaged with us. We do a monthly social justice speaker series that is led by Elder Victor Hanna, who is on our team. And, we're engaging all types of folks. They're not always clergy. They may not necessarily, they might just be experts that are lifting up issues. They could be policy folks or medical providers. But we try to engage our community online. And, many times, because we normally cast it live, but by the time we go back, 2 days later, 3 days later, the video has been watched multiple times because people just want to be able to engage as it makes sense to them. So you can follow us on Facebook or Instagram, to be a part on YouTube. Just look up SisterReach and you will find our work. We also have our newsletter that goes out. We are combining both our faith and our regular newsletter here soon because our work is evolving also. So we'll have a little something for everybody in our new newsletter. We used to just kind of have them streamlined as one or the other, but there's so much going on and it's only so much capacity that we have. And then annually, we have our faith advocacy and religion symposium. And for the past 5 years, our symposium has brought together faith leaders, organizers, religious scholars, advocates, artists, and community members from across the country to explore what it means to build a more just and liberated world with a sacred analysis. Reverend Andre has participated with us, I believe, almost every year. We've done it in person here in Memphis. And this year we plan to do the same thing, but we also recognize that we are living in extraordinary times. And across this country, because of the escalating attacks on all the things, right? And the very humanity of those who have historically been pushed to the margins, we are realizing that we're no longer in a season where we can just convene, right, to be empowered. Or should I say, empowered alone, right? And that the mandate is for us to convene for our liberation, because we are in a state of emergency. And moments like these require us to do what SisterReach has always done, which is respond, adapt, and organize. So we're actually going to be pivoting this symposium this year. And our theme is going to remain protecting humanity, standing in sacred authority. But this year, we're going to have a gathering that will shift from a traditional public symposium into a more intimate, strategic convening designed to bring together national thought partners, our local partners, our regional partners, interfaith leaders, organizers, strategists, and trusted folks to help shape what our work is going to look like next. And this is going to be a space for honest dialogue, courageous imagination, and collective action. We're going to be asking things like, how do we protect humanity in this moment? How do we build an interfaith movement capable of responding to Christian nationalism, attacks on human rights, the weakening of religious autonomy, and the policies that continue to harm our most vulnerable neighbors? And most importantly, like I've been saying, how are we going to do it together? Right. And so this for us is a strategic pivot. And it's always, because we've worked always from this position of offense, never defense. I try not to be reactionary in my activism and definitely how I lead the organization. But because we're not an organization that simply responds to a crisis, we organize through it, we innovate through it, we build through it. So there's going to be opportunities to add your own insight and expertise to this intimate convening and to serve even on our National Advisory Council, right? And so it's going to take place here in Memphis on October the 15th. And 16th, and we're going to hold it we normally hold it at the Doubletree when we do the full symposium. This time we're going to have it at Christ Missionary Baptist Church. Pastors allowed me to take over the fellowship hall and a couple other rooms as we need in order for us to do this work. And if you're interested in being a part or interested in your coalition or your work being a part of this, I invite you to email Elder Victor and let them know that you want to be a part. Some folks we already have in our list that we're going to call. Reverend Andre, you already know you're on my list. I'm going to reach out to you. I want you to be in front, brother. You know what I'm saying? But either way, we want you to be engaged. And then that's it. That's it. So I got mine done at 4:12. I got mine done. Listen, so we still got a few more minutes to talk. So I will stop sharing and just, for these last few minutes, any takeaway thoughts, any things you want to lift up, anything you want to share. Hopefully this helped. And if it didn't, you can say that too. It's okay. It's all right. I'm here to listen. I see you, Mr. Payne.
Thank you so much, Dr. Scott. Very informative.
You're welcome.
Really enjoyed it. Yes, ma'am. Thank you.